All right, moving on to page 9, we have the third characteristic of verbs, and that is mood. Mood indicates the relationship of the action of a verb to reality. That's what the textbook says. I want to insert right in between indicates and the word the an author's portrayal of, so that this reads, mood indicates an author's portrayal of the relationship of the action of a verb to reality. Now, why is that significant? Well, in Greek, an author can choose to portray an action in many different ways. He can choose to portray it as actual, as potential, or as highly unlikely. And so the mood an author chooses is part of his portrayal, his painting, so to speak, of the action, and specifically the way that action relates to reality. Now, what you see in the chart is the number of times each mood occurs in the New Testament. The indicative mood, which portrays an action as real, is by far the most frequent. The subjunctive portrays an action as potential or possible. And in English, we use words like may, might, or should to indicate the subjunctive. The imperative expresses a command which is dependent upon the response of the hearer, and therefore it's a potential action. We started out last semester with commands: anastethi, katavethi, anavethi, treche, and so on. And the fourth mood is the optative, which occurs only 70 times in the New Testament, but expresses a polite request, a wish, and sometimes a prayer. Now, let me just make a comment about the indicative mood, and that is, just because an author puts it in the indicative mood doesn't mean it's true. He's portraying it as true, but if you wanted to lie, you would use the indicative mood to portray that which was not true as true. So, while there aren't many instances of lying in the New Testament, we get examples of this, for example, in the Old Testament, where Satan tells a lie to Eve, "You will not surely die," and lies about God's statements and characters using the indicative mood. So, we've seen tense, voice, and mood. Now we come to the fourth characteristic of verbs, and that is person. Person indicates the actor of the verb. First person is I, or in the plural, we. Second person is you. And the third person is he, she, it, they, man, book. Any noun that functions as the subject of a verb is in the third person. So we've been using third-person verbs. For example, I am sitting on the chair. Ego katheme epi tes cathedras. Perhaps you are sitting. Su kathes se epi tes cathedras. He avtos kathete epi tes cathedras. So we've been using first, second, and third person. And we've been using singular and plural, which brings us to the last characteristic of verbs, number, which indicates whether the actor of a verb is singular or plural. I am is singular, we are is plural. You, in English, we don't have a distinct pronoun for you singular versus you plural, but Greek does. And I've been using those, and we'll see them as we go along. Third person, he, she, it, is, they, are. So, verbs have tense, voice, mood, person, and number. And we'll need to learn to recognize those aspects of any verb. Moving on to page 10, and the last page of the grammar section, we want to have a brief overview of nouns. The Greek noun has gender, number, and case. Gender indicates whether a noun is masculine, feminine, or neuter. Now, this is going to be something that's new to us in English. We don't think about whether a chair is masculine, feminine, or neuter. We use it for basically everything that doesn't have biological gender. Whereas Greek assigned gender to different nouns, masculine, feminine, neuter. For example, eithura, the door, is feminine. To edaphos, the floor, is neuter. And o logos, the word, is masculine. Now, as the textbook notes, gender is a purely grammatical phenomenon. It is not related to sex. Further, it's not related to psychology or philosophy. Greeks did not think that there was something feminine about a door, or neuter about the floor, or masculine about a word. That was just the way their language had developed post the Tower of Babel. So nouns have gender. They also have number. That is, they're singular or plural. And they have case. Case indicates the grammatical function of a noun in a sentence. And you've been learning this inductively last semester. I was using the proper cases as I told you stories and talked to you, but now we're going to learn to recognize this explicitly. The word order of a Greek sentence is very flexible, as you learned, and case endings, not word order, determine whether something's the subject, the direct object, the indirect object, and so on. Greek has 5 cases, and those cases are the nominative, the genitive, dative, accusative, and vocative. The nominative case is used when you want to say that a word is the subject of a verb or is functioning as a predicate nominative. Example of a predicate nominative: Tom is a carpenter. And a carpenter is renaming or further identifying who Tom is. So it would be in the nominative case in Greek. Genitive, we use the genitive case often with possession, though there are many other uses of the genitive as well. The dative is used to indicate the indirect object, and it's translated with the word to or for. There is no word to or for in the dative case itself. It's just how we translate it in English. The accusative is used to indicate the direct object of the verb, and the vocative is direct address. Now, we've had lots of practice with the vocative case because my name is Philippos o Didaskalos, but when you speak to me, you say Philippe o Didaskalos. That's using the vocative case, direct address. And that concludes the overview of nouns. Nouns have gender, number, and case. Genders are masculine, feminine, and neuter. The number is singular or plural. And there are 5 cases: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and vocative. And that brings us to the vocabulary section of this lesson. I want to make a few comments here about the vocabulary as you're seeing it there in the textbook. All of the forms here on the left-hand side are what are called lexical forms. The form Greek lexicons, which is dictionaries, used to list a word is called a lexical form. And verbs, for example, the first word, are always listed in the first person present active indicative form. Akuo. Akuo means I am hearing. Now, over here you see that there's parenthetical information after I hear, which says it takes a genitive or accusative direct object. This is not part of the verb akuo's meaning. It's just giving you information about the verb akuo. Perhaps you remember from the one of the verses of Podes Hires Kephale that we learned last semester, that the second verse starts, tous osin akouosu, tukto tes hersinu. Well, in that first line, tous osin akouosu, we see the verb akouo, I hear, and its direct object is you, and su is in the genitive case. So this is an example of akouo taking a genitive direct object. This phrase, tous osin akouosu, means I hear you with my ears. After each of the nouns in this vocabulary list, you see the word o, which would be pronounced ha in a Rasmussian pronunciation. The o after the nouns is the masculine article. It's not part of the word. Rather, it's listed after each masculine noun to identify that it is masculine. Okay, so anthropos is masculine, theos is masculine, kurios is masculine, logos and huios, all masculine. The feminine article will be listed after feminine nouns, and the neuter article will be listed after neuter nouns. In the case of esten and ke, the parenthetical information is, in fact, part of their meaning. Esten means he is, she is, or it is, depending on who the subject is. Ke can mean and, also, it can mean even, it can even mean but sometimes. Ke is a conjunction that connects two elements that are equal together. So you don't want to just learn that ke means and, you also need to know its additional meanings, and, but, also, or even. And finally, after the verb esten, you see that the nu is in parentheses. It's put in parentheses because the nu is movable, that is, it can occur or not occur. However, I just looked it up in the New Testament, and the form este occurs only one time, whereas esten occurs 896 times. So for all practical purposes, the verb esten, the nu, is not movable. It's there to stay. Now, for your vocabulary quiz, you will be required to recognize these words and write their meaning in English.